Well, it's been months since chapter 1 of a story that I wrote called The Woman Who Wove the World. So it's time for chapter 2. Just first look. Let's admire this beautiful African Christmas tree. Isn't it wonderful? There's nothing like a baobab when it comes to Christmas time. Anyway, for those of you who might remember, this is based on the work of Remedios Varo. And chapter 2 is happening for a very obvious reason. It's because Barbara Whitfield has a birthday. Once again, here is my lovely assistant. Happy birthday, Barbara Whitfield.
Happy birthday.
And on with the next chapter. The Woman Who Wove the World, Chapter 2. Whether a second or a year had passed in that smoky dream, Aelwyn could not say. Yet, when she swam to her mind's surface, she saw hallways and doors stretching out before her, her thoughts like insects' wings, diaphanous and furtive, and her own mind's eyes looking on accusingly, sternly, and yet frightened. Some force, unseen yet irrevocable, drove her through those doorways, and in her somnambulation she beheld, as through a dirty glass, or was it an aged and decaying mirror, bizarre characters. In the first room sat a trio of disfigured angels. They sat perched on stilted chairs, just as their bodies, if ever they stood and walked, would have to be borne upon stilted legs. Their membranous wings grew from their thoughts, it seemed, entirely unable to lift any part of them, save for their ideas, which they self-proclaimed lofty. "Hello," said the first, maintaining no real contact in his eyes. "Hello," began Aelwyn, before the second cut her off. "We are feeding. Wouldst you?" "Well, It may not be to your liking," said the third. "Few are able to handle such pure richness." "What is it that you're—" "Yes," said the first again, once more slicing into her. "None with any blemish even of thought can indulge in these sweetnesses." "Well said, brother," the others both intoned as they continued their obsession. Aelwyn looked on for an age, noting how the trio never once looked even at one another, much less to the sky and freedom high above. Yet the slurping continued, with self-satisfied moans and ecstasies, punctuated only by more self-congratulation. Beneath the Ascari's chairs, tied by a delicate yet adamantine knot of silk, were peculiar creatures, part bird, part cat, an amalgam of natures at once benign yet abominable. Amidst the somehow truculent noises of feasting, Aelwyn silently retired back to the hallway from whence she had come. Once in the next room, Aelwyn found herself immediately trapped in the body of a child, holding a brass horn and surrounded by gigantic figures wrapped in conversation and, again, mutual admiration. As before, Aelwyn noted their spindly legs and self-absorbed eyes, but one, only one, seemed to be looking at her, almost willing her to look back. She didn't know how she knew, but something told her that the rooms made by these giants were false, though they were crystalline and sharp. The strange gilding of their clothes that clung to them was mossy, weak, and she somehow knew that she needed to follow that other figure's gaze inward, and somehow she knew that this other figure was, in part, herself. She found herself transported to yet another room, where a shadowy figure danced in front of her. As before, she held yarn in her hands, and that yarn stretched deep within the caverns and vaults of the dancer, guiding the way for birds that flew to freedom. Yet for her, freedom was within the dancer. Following her yarn, she walked through those chambers, deep within, shadows growing deeper, turning to darkness, becoming pitch. She walked an arid path forever, when suddenly she emerged from a cave and found herself walking within a cathedral of trees, bridges between their trunks and boughs, and notes of music gently floating in the gloaming. Across the transept, she spotted the musician from the fossil forest. Relief filled her to see anything familiar, yet he wouldn't get closer, but just called to her. "I'm still seeking my moon, you see." To which she just stood, mute. "But first, you must find yours." "My moon?" Eluan asked. "Of course not," he said. "It's different for us all, but you'll find it, and then you'll help me." "Where?" she pleaded. "I think you know," he said. "You're very nearly there already." And he was gone. Again, Eluan began walking along the boughs within the wastelands, yet somehow with an urgency and sureness, each step somehow stronger. Before long, and after forever, she strode in power and with unassumed force. The trees themselves gave way as open avenues. The stars and planets fed each purposeful step she took. Radiant, she stepped past others trapped by themselves, walled by who they thought they were. Not stepped, floated, flew. Her freedom shone within her, effulgent and numinous, when suddenly a figure stood before her, or rather, balanced before her. A town elder on wheels, hand sternly in command, opened the trap door round his face and fixed her with a gaze. "You cannot go, young one," he declared mechanically. "Round Town holds you, and she shall not let you go. Round and round and round is the only way," as his wheels and mechanics spun rustily. Eluan fixed him with a purposeful gaze. His head bobbed in her hands, swinging from its wisps of beard. Her eyes blazed as she walked through the courtyards, not following the lines of its circles, but crossing their rounds and breaking them with her steps. Even within her breast she knew fiercely where she was going, and the world made way. She let one door open, for each one closed as she chose with each step she took, and before long a final door ruptured before her, leading out of the very edge of Round Town, down straight stone steps that led into a forest that was alive, and which somehow had been sucking, swallowing, digesting Round Town all this time. Each step she took was met with angry eyes from the battlements of the town, eyes belonging to people still trapped in the dark halls their minds had made. And yet she walked on, leaving naught but her shadow and the echo of her footsteps and her determination.